Don't let the cloud, yes.
Through the cloud. Stop.
So
that looks like it's working.
I'm here with Phoebe Tickell, and my name is Nora Bateson, and we are going to have a conversation today about just kind of what it means to be in this moment in time with all this incredible change making on the nearby horizon, and all the interesting sort of history and tonality that comes into the creating of one's own voice and character in this world, of being in this transition. And Phoebe and I have had a couple of conversations in the past, and we decided that we would record one or two, depending on how it goes, and try to bring in some different textures and atmospheres and sort of the depth of not only the intellectual and academic knowledge that we've both worked hard to achieve, but also the other aspects of self and expression that are very much needed in the process of thinking about cultural change or actually any kind of change. That it's so much more than just something dry or a 5-part system or a methodology or a particular job. Yeah, or a linear conversation. That it's actually all about who you are in your dark moments, in your dirty moments, in your, blessed, inspired moments, in your confused moments, in your bitchy moments. All of that matters. But that so often the tone gets kind of homogenized into the sort of professional, almost like news anchor woman or man type of tonality, and in essays too, that the essays get sort of ironed out into this flatness.
And also, I think a key thing here is that in those essays or in those moments where there's this separation of self or separation of the system who is speaking or feeling or, reporting on what we are observing around us, or what we hope or not hope, we'll come on to hope, I'm sure, hope to happen. I think it's about bringing our whole beings into inquiry and not being afraid to collaborate in that way as well. Whole person with their experiences, with our, being women, being of a certain age or not. I think all of it comes into what it means for us to be change makers, but often often feels like it's kind of a detached person speaking about change, and you get articles that say people do this and this is what's happening, and it's all of this like passive language, which is interesting.
It's a question too of credibility, that somehow I sense that it's not okay to express the intimacy or the intuition or the feeling around what it is that we're talking about. That it's not okay to be hysterical, and yet it might be completely appropriate to have some hysterical going on, and yet that credibility somehow is jeopardized if I bring the real subjectivity, and I don't really like that word, but let me rephrase it.
It's like objectifying subjectivity by calling it that.
Exactly. Okay, what I'm trying to say is if I show up with my whole self, then there's irrational aspects in that. And that somehow undermines my my validity or my knowledge or my creativity. And yet, seriously, so much of what is deemed rational is actually
totally irrational.
And it frames the limits of the possibility of what we can communicate or think about or express. Those limits are the limits that are holding back the possibility of all sorts of change.
That resonates so deeply with me, coming from the world of science. And I mean, you've also, you in a way, you're very involved in the scientific world too. But just how many irrational rationalities we kind of cling on to, but at the same time don't allow the most rational thing of all, which is that I am a human being observing the world. And so it's this human being that's reporting on, the science or the system or the molecular bacterial protein. So it's totally irrational to kind of try and pretend that it's a machine that is reporting back and sensing and responding. I think there's a big, I feel as if we're entering an era where becoming more human again, like actually returning to our humanness is a huge part of what needs to happen, or what I feel needs to happen. In a time when we've been tending so towards technology and kind of mechanization and trying to even mechanize the process of being a human. And then we get kind of slapped in the face by complex systems, which are just like, nope, you cannot mechanize me. So it's an exciting time in some ways.
There's been this article that's been floating around that you may have seen, that is about how in early texts there's no mention of the color blue.
And I haven't seen that.
They're sort of floating around. If you look it up, you'll find it. Yeah. And what's interesting to me about that is that, my work is all about sort of helping people to perceive and express and communicate and think in terms of complexity. So I'm acutely aware that there's a kind of sensitivity that just kind of isn't developed yet. Or for some people, it's more developed than for others. And it's a sensitivity to being able to even perceive it or to sense it, let alone describe and communicate about complexity, let alone really consider it in terms of decision making. So I think that, obviously the crises that we're facing globally on any front, whether it's economic or ecological or cultural or, addiction, religion, terrorism, whatever you want to, anywhere you point your finger, you're going to have, you're going to come up with the same pattern, that we're dealing with deep, complex, cross-sector, cross-cultural, cross-generational, cross-context issues. And we're not able to deal with them because we can't really perceive them properly. And we haven't got the tools to do that. And so
we haven't developed the organs. It's not even just, it's like having to develop a whole way of being. So that's in a way what Schumacher's, holistic science course is trying to do, is like prepare people with the ability to even sense that, not know all the definitions, and it's a very embodied process. And it takes, a year to do that master's and to actually begin to, just seeing the students transform in that ability. It's been really eye-opening.
Yeah. And honestly, I've seen a lot of people go through a lot of programs and come out the other end with great vocabulary and absolutely no physical, embodied, emotional sense of that. And the thing is that it's not really rational. There's a level of rationality that keeps us in the mechanistic patterns.
Yeah.
And
Something to cling to.
Yeah, I'm not saying that it's irrational. I'm just saying that it doesn't fit into the tonality or the aesthetic or the approach of communication or even of assessment or analysis that what we know of as rational fits into. And I find that so much, even in my own work, that I sense that I'm supposed to hold so much of myself back and hid behind a cloak of professionalism. And I need my whole self to even begin to be a sense organ for the complexity around me. Like a sea anemone or something, like I need all the tentacles to be available.
Yeah. It's just actually having this image of unfolding, like you need to unfold all of yourself to be able to, so the tentacles is a nice image.
And it's so open and so vulnerable and so juicy and
raw
and sometimes wrong. And sometimes
wrong.
Yeah. Sometimes lost. Sometimes really beautiful, brilliant moments of inspiration and epiphany come in. But they don't come if you're half closed and only looking for that which has been known before. You can't get there without this kind of, the sea anemone opening wide. And that's where I feel, for me, that's where I feel, if we want to talk about hope, that it's there. It's in that possibility of just completely being present with not in the sort of, the power of now way, but in the sense of my whole being is willing to be here. And hope is a really interesting word, because for me, that's about willingness to actually change everything. And that means that
in our last conversation, we had that chat about the word hope, which I found really interesting, because since we had that conversation, I've been noticing that word cropping up everywhere. And, Joanna Macy talks about active hope. Somebody the other day was talking about engaged hope, and that there are these different kinds of hope. But I'd love to hear your take again on the word hope and the danger of hope, the danger of the positive psychology. Well, what was that headline that we came up with? Positive psychology ruins, endangers the future of our world, or it was amazing. Very triggering article title.
I can't remember what it was, but it was a good one. It's not okay for people in our line of work to be generating hopelessness. We're supposed to be painting a picture of a positive future, and about something about us giving that process of transformation dignity and joy, and that it should feel good. And I have real issues with that. I would like to feel good. I would like for there to be dignity and joy, but I would like for that to be really authentic. And in my own life, what I know is that the things that I have learned and the wisdom that I have come across, I came across by being willing to walk through the dark night, to go into something that hurt and to learn from it, and to really be in that pain, not to indulge it or to, ride it. Is it like a, horse to the victory? It's not about being a victim in it.
No, but it's reaching that rock bottom place where you don't know. You just don't know. You just accept. I do not know what I'm supposed to do, what is going to happen, who is going to help me, how I'm going to get better, whatever it is. Like, you just reach that hopelessness, which allows you to start, actually start doing something.
Yeah. I mean, if you take little tiny steps toward making change, and those little tiny steps are not really change-making steps, they're sort of sideways steps, like, I'm going to stop drinking Coca-Cola and start drinking Coke Zero. That's not change-making. Okay, or
how does that relate to hope?
Well, the way that it relates to hope is the idea that we can actually make the changes that we need to make, both internally and socially, culturally, globally, without really shifting our understanding of life, our perception of life. And
is it also something to do with, just also about being willing to sacrifice everything? Like, are you sort of saying that hope is something that comes from a place of thinking that, I can change things using, not really changing anything. Like, I can make change by recycling, or by, using, not stopping drinking cow's milk, or whatever it is, but that there's this point that you reach where you realize that it's going to take sacrificing things that are really dear to us, like a career, like a really successful career in the old way of doing things, or like, things that are just deeper than, like, not taking as many flights a year, or they have a very different gesture, don't they? Like, there's a different kind of behavior that comes.
And let me give you an example of really what I'm seeing, okay? Because I'm kind of beating around the bush, and there's no need for it.
Get in there.
I have been doing these warm data labs. And the warm data lab is a process that I developed for groups of people to really dive with them into a realm of deep interdependency in life. So we really can feel like, how deep is this complexity? Okay, because I spent years working with people talking about interdependency and systems. And, intellectually, we get it. And then 20 minutes later, we start talking about education systems or something or other. And pretty soon I start to recognize, they're talking about the education system as though the problem with education was in education. It's not in education. So this is what happens with these warm data labs, is that you get into the question of, like, where is the problem with the education system? And is it in the testing? Is it in the students? Is it in the diet? Is it in the culture? Is it in the thing that we think it is? How about the employment world? Like, what kind of citizens is the education system supposed to be making? And then there's finance, and then there's politics, and then there's religion, and there's all sorts of things that come into looking at, really, how are we going to deal with the issues we're looking at in the education system? From race relations all the way up to the lunch program, and how that connects to the sugar industry and big pharma and ADHD, and how that connects to the opiate problem, and so on. So you can see that what happened there is we started with a problem that took up this much of the screen, just like right down there, right? And pretty soon, what you're talking about is the whole screen. And so what happens is that the fix-its, the solutions that were geared toward this piece don't apply anymore. And what I'm seeing is that there is this moment that takes place where people realize, oh my God, look at how big this is. And immediately what they feel is hopeless. How can we ever deal with this? How are we going to deal with the education system when the problem is, the fact that whatever, the doctors are prescribing these meds and the parents aren't home and the food is full of trans fats and
sugar, and then there's the
Roundup
drugs,
and
diabetes, and
right. And then there's these corporate curriculums that are for sale and so on. And they get hopeless. There is a moment of, uh-oh, we can't fix this. And everything in our world, in science, in education, in our whole process of problem solving has taken that moment and said, okay, if the problem's too big, what you need to do is, this is like algebra, you start factoring it, okay? You take out a piece and you solve that one little piece. You make it manageable. You simplify.
Right. Yeah, it sort of feels as if reductionism came from a place of being human in being totally overwhelmed by the world. Like, it almost feels as if we've gone in like this because it's just like, how do we control everything? We can't control everything. If we separate them into lots of little pieces and name them and make different departments for them and put different teams in those departments, then we can control everything and we can solve every single problem and it's all going to be fine. And then now we're just finding like we're here and we're just having to like let go and come all the way back out here and just experience that total overwhelm and acceptance that we are not going to solve things through fixing them in the way that we're used to fixing things, or just fixing it all. Like, fixing is just the wrong word. Like, we can't even stay the same if we want to fix the problems that we're facing.
That's right. And so that's why I'm having issues and I feel critical of the notion of generating hope. Because so often what that means is not
going to be seen as like witches who just, no, there is no hope, let go of it, no hope allowed, blackness only, stop.
I mean, of course, that's not what I mean. Of course, actually, what I'm saying is, in that moment, when I have a whole group of people who are really saying to each other and together, oh, this is so much bigger than we thought. In that moment, we have a group of people who are ready to start thinking together, learning together, developing this sensitivity we were talking about a minute ago together, witnessing and giving names and words around possibilities inside that complexity, that human beings by nature are in fact creative and improvisational and learning creatures. And that if we do have the chance, we will start to think and behave and see in new ways and have entirely new forms of inquiry and approach the situation in a new way. But as long as we're looking for hope of how we're going to fix this much of the education system, we're not going to have the opportunity to be hopeless for a minute and then to take it to another step. And so, really what I am concerned about is not hope. It's the cop-out of feeling like I don't want to tackle things I don't know how to tackle because I could get discouraged if I try to do something that I don't know how to do.
So it's being comfortable. If it's not to do with hope, it's more just like being comfortable also with not knowing, or just being in a state of not pretending.
Recognizing that we actually have to go to that uncomfortable place. This is going to hurt. And that's okay. There is dignity and there's joy and there's hope in being able to go into this together and say, I don't know how to do this, but I know that if I sit in a room of 50 people for 4 hours and we're really thinking about this together and we're practicing taking the whole of this interdependency into consideration, and by that I mean intellectually, emotionally, physically, culturally, I know that we will make a shift. And
so that's an interesting part for me, the knowing, because that's where we got to last time, was that, I was talking about, no, but I do have hope in, like, if I wouldn't be doing this work if I didn't identify with some level of hope. But I think what you responded was, there's a difference, at least for you, between like that deep knowing and hope. And there's that feeling of like, I in a way I don't know, but I also know. I mean, maybe it's just living in those paradoxical spaces between poles. Like, I know, and I also completely don't know. And that's in between those things is where I'm living. Or like, it's very different to hope.
Well, and it requires some different things, some different characteristics of learning together. This thing that I have termed Samatha. That if you look at the Samatha of those groups that are coming together in these warm data labs, what happens there is that there's another set of criteria really around what it means to learn together. And part of that has to do with the idea that actually there's no hero here. There's no tall poppy. There's no individual that's going to come out shining as the King Arthur that pulled the sword from the stone. There's no one's name going to go up in lights as the one that saved us. This is us in the liminal space, us together or not at all. And so there's a kind of integrity that requires. And I am asking a lot of the people that I am with now, because I don't really want to be around the kind of change makers who are in it at the level of ambition. Or competition. And I mean, I'm seeing that everywhere, and I'm so disgusted by it. I just feel like, in the name of collaboration and bringing the global future together, there's this huge competition.
The global shift of consciousness.
Yeah, that thing is like totally contaminated with a super, self-serving people. It's bizarre. It's so ironic.
Yeah, and there's something for me in this around care. And again, we've chatted a bit about this, but just like when you really see others who really, really, really deeply care about this work and each other and the world and being kind, and it's about care. And it's like, I do think there are a lot of people in this change maker, it's almost like a profession. There are some people who become doctors because they deeply care about being a doctor and caring for people who are sick and like showing up at 2 a.m. to care for someone who is in trouble. And then you have doctors who want to get paid a lot. And there's doctors who really like the idea of being a doctor. And that, there's in every place, and change making, whatever that isn't, it's not separate from that. I think there are a lot of people showing up to change make because they like the idea of being a change maker. And I mean, I guess it doesn't hurt to have as many people trying to change things and lead with a different kind of example as possible. But at the same time, does it, weaken that movement or take away from the integrity of, what it means to show up and actually, or as we said, the people, when I see the words like complexity and emergence and feedback like thrown around all the time. And part of me is like, the scientist in me is kind of like, oh no, like that's not, there's a bit of me that's just like upset because they're not being used, in their correct terms, or I don't feel like the person who is saying those things is really embodying or has really deeply experienced what that means. And then there's another part of me which is like, well, who are you to be so judgmental? And actually, isn't it just fantastic that people are even saying these things, and it's kind of shifting the consciousness around this? If, even if it takes complexity and systems thinking being cool, which it feels like, that is happening.
But
I hope that there's a feed-forward mechanism.
I think this caring thing is really important, because it's like it kind of goes back to the anemone and this, the wide openness of your whole self. And, it's not easy to be a human being. And with all of the talk that sort of floats around artificial intelligence and so on and so forth, sometimes I wonder, just as a human being go from one day to the next, wondering how can I learn to see more of what my children are experiencing? How can I be more careful around these sorts of delicate interrelationships that are so easy to tread upon and really hurt people, or to be, how can I tomorrow be a little bit better at being, at noticing the limits of my own cultural constructs? How can I hurt the people that I love a little less? And then how can I hurt the world around me a little less? And how can I be somehow a source that is generating a kind of caring that that doesn't confine others? So and learn a little more and take it a little further and be a little bit better. Can I be a little bit better Nora tomorrow? And that aspect of being a human being is a deep process. And you don't have to do it. You could just get up tomorrow and just feel you have every right to just be whoever you were yesterday. You don't have to go there. And maybe you'll be just as fine. Maybe you'll just maybe you're fine. Maybe that's okay. But I guess in terms of the long story of this sort of change-making business, I feel like there's been many decades of beautiful human beings with beautiful, brilliant minds and sparkling hearts that have wanted to address the kind of things that we are still trying to address: the ecology, the race relations, the wealth disparity, the level of illness and healing that needs to take place in the world, and so on and so forth. And that these decades have passed by, and they've passed by, and they've passed by. And the little bits of incremental change that have been made, while they're not to be underestimated, let's not overestimate them either. That the space we have in front of us requires that we care, and that we care enough to risk everything, to change everything. And that's, I think, when you're talking about that caring, it's that I care enough actually to change everything. And that's a whole different order, really, of caring. It's the order of change where you're willing to say to someone who's, I don't know, maybe stolen your written material and put it in theirs, or lifted your work, or been in competition with you in a really overt way, and be able to say, look, I don't want to play these games. We have work to do. The world's on fire. Like, give it up. We just gotta put the competition to rest and work together now, because here we are. There's this beautiful line in the beginning of the book, The Red Tent. And this, speaking of sisters thinking, and she says, we've been lost to each other for so long. And, that's kind of how it feels to me. And especially work that I do with you, Phoebe, it feels just that there's the possibility to not be lost to each other, that there's the possibility to put it down and just go forward. But that means that
with the long game,
you have to be willing to tear up, and that's not necessarily rational.
I was about to say, I don't think this kind of caring is rational. Like, I think it's the kind of caring that makes you turn your back on, a career that's going to ensure that you're safe financially, that's going to make people listen to you as a woman in this world. Like, which I think is something, that I've experienced very pretty recently, of just like making that choice and feeling completely irrational about it. And then that question that you asked me, which is why are you doing this? Why? That's the question we need to ask ourselves. Like, why are we doing this? What is this about? But I really, really liked what you just read from Sisters Thinking. That was the title of the...
No, the title of the book is The Red Tent. I don't know if you've ever read that book, but it's a beautiful book. And it's about the women's sort of experience. And that's the first line of the book, is just that we've been lost to each other for so long. And because of being in competition, the idea that, the deep sort of creation myth we have, which is attached to Darwinian evolution theory, that says that nature is a competition. And therefore, human nature is to be competitive and be in conflict. And I don't think it's a good idea to naturalize those things. And I think we have every possibility of noticing that metaphor is not serving. And
it's not entirely correct. I mean, if you look at, in every single cell in our body, we have a bacteria that makes all the energy for us, like a very old millions of years old bacteria that is now, like, we don't even recognize it as a different being, but every single cell has got bacteria in it, like different beings without whom we would not exist. Like, we'd die if we were to just like delete them.
And if you were to say that those bacteria that we are in existence with are, okay, there's a false dichotomy that I'm getting at here, which is the dichotomy that I think is nonsense between competition and collaboration. And I think we should save that for our next one. Let's talk about competition and collaboration for our next session.
That sounds good. That sounds very good to me. I had such a beautiful image actually when you read that. Sorry, all the doors are slamming now because it's got windy in the evening. It's a sign something serious is happening. Bang, bang. Okay. I had this image of, as you read that quote out, of kind of two people meeting and just turning, from, like, there's this path of competition that I think, we've treaded so long, and it feels so familiar because it's just what seems to happen all the time, and it feels like I could just see this turning away and taking a first step in a completely new direction. And it's one that is around learning and kind of laying on the table, I have this experience, so I know better, or I'm older, so I know better, or I have this race, so I know better, or, all of these things. It's like actually agreeing to show up in Samatha, as you said, just learning. And I see so many people, I see the word learning being really triggering for a lot of people. Like, a lot of people are like, no, what I'm doing is not learning, it's consultancy, or it's, I'm not doing education-y stuff. Like, learning is like a dirty word. At least in my experience, I've been noticing it's like such a dirty word, because it takes admitting that you have things to learn, which is just a scary thing if you're a woman, or if you're someone who's had to work everybody has had to work to convince others, like, I know what I'm talking about, listen to me, I have this qualification, hire me, listen to me, whatever. And then to go from that into like, I don't really know anything truly, and I'm willing to show up and learn from the beginning again.
Right. Or the other way is when you have to say, I know this thing, I don't know how I know it. I don't have a bibliography for this knowledge. I know it somewhere inside me. I don't know why I know this thing. I don't know why it is that I know that, that you and I can have a conversation like this, that I'm well aware I can't have with a lot of other people. Well, how do I know that? So it's an interesting thing of both.
How do you justify that?
Yeah, and not knowing, and authorizing these other forms of inquiry that take us into new ways of making sense of the world, so that sensitivity. I mean, obviously, we don't know what the hell we're doing. Okay, we have a world that's full of wicked, complex problems that our experts do not know what to do with. So clearly, no one knows what to do. There is no knower at this point.
But also, even just on a really human level of, like, just admitting that this whole being a human on Earth, having a life that lasts roughly like 80 to 100 years, not having any idea what happens after that life ends, not even really knowing, having these like limited sensory organs. I'm getting really meta here, but this is sometimes how I feel, of just how I think, is like, I don't know at all. And, so much in life, you're kind of in this state of pretending to know what you're supposed to do, because otherwise, everything would lose meaning, and you'd probably just crawl up in a heap and like not do anything. Because it's like, if it's just being comfortable with not knowing is part of being alive, and appreciating the beauty, even though you have no idea. I think there's just like this deep fear that I think comes with being a human who has a brain and consciousness to even contemplate, that they don't know. Like, we're so burdened in a way, like being Homo sapiens, and actually having to, like, being gifted these like divine thinking abilities, which then it's like this double bind of just being, probably actually using the word double bind here wrong, and I'm using it with the wrong person. Definitely knows what double bind means, so just delete that, not double bind. But just, it's just such a burden, and I think it's all linked. To me, it's all linked with complexity, with being a whole person, with caring, with showing up to change things, is just having to laugh a little bit because we have no clue, like, what is this about? Why are we here? Why are we on this beautiful planet? Why do I get to watch sunsets? Why do we get to like share language when we're talking about things we can't even see? Like we're like these mythical creatures that can even share understanding about, you know, I'm thinking something and I'm able to get you to think maybe even the same thing through a piece of silicon with it. You know, it's just, if you think about it. Anyway, going off track, there's a lot of not knowing that comes with being truly alive and aware of, this being human.
Yeah. And that's why it's okay to be hopeless for a minute and allow that to generate the next level of understanding. I don't think it's a good idea to go to the land of, you know, endless, eternal despair and forget it, we're screwed, you know, but it's good to go for a minute and realize the way I've been trying to deal with this situation is not big enough. It's not enough. There's the way that we have been taught to look at the world, the way we've been trained to think about this, the way that we understand spirituality, the way that we understand what it means to be whatever gender we feel we are, the way that all of that was not enough. It was not enough. When we come to this moment in history, when we're at the brink of all sorts of destruction of our species and thousands of others, it's just important to recognize that no matter how beautiful human history has been, we haven't done enough. We haven't figured it out yet. We don't know enough.
I wouldn't say human history has been particularly beautiful, by the way.
Well, there's beautiful poetry, there's beautiful art, there's
some nice bits.
There's some beautiful math, and there's beautiful food, and there's beautiful architecture, and there's something beautiful, but there's a lot of, but even that beautiful stuff is not enough. And that's, you know, I think that's a really important place to be. I mean, if you, I think it's important to recognize we can do better. We might not get it right, but we can do better. Yeah. Let's stop.
Wow, this is
for next time.
Yeah. How long have we been talking for?
I have no idea, but I'm going to turn it off.
Oh, no.
Okay.
Okay.